I realize I'm very late to the party on this one, but I figured, well, if I'm talking about Comic Con panels, why not also talk about Christopher Nolan's first time at Comic Con, and not only his first time at Comic Con, Matthew McConaughey's first time at Comic Con. And if you haven't figured out what movie I'm talking about by now, then look at the title. I don't have time to explain. It's Interstellar, the Christopher Nolan space adventure that's coming in November. Okay, it's obviously the first directorial Christopher Nolan movie since The Dark Knight Rises. And when it comes to Christopher Nolan movies, I am not just limited to the Batman movies. I have obviously seen Christopher Nolan's work, and I really like it. I mean, in my opinion, he has not directed a bad movie yet. Because if you look at something like Memento, The Prestige, Inception, I mean, all these things outside of the Dark Knight trilogy, they're also very solid. I mean, they're very story-driven tales about very intriguing characters and very psychologically interesting concepts. So hearing that he was going to do a space adventure, or at least a sci-fi flick, had me interested. And the panel itself, it was just him and McConaughey, which Matthew McConaughey is also another actor who has really turned around in terms of credibility in recent years, because there was a time when Matthew McConaughey was not a very bankable star. I mean, I'm talking about the days of Sahara. But now he's in great movies like Mud. He won an Oscar for Dallas Buyers Club. He was in True Detective. I mean, he's just all over the place now. And Wolf of Wall Street, he had a small role in that. So Matthew McConaughey, in my opinion, is a very bankable star nowadays. So seeing a very talented actor like him paired with Christopher Nolan, someone who, to my knowledge, he has never worked with before, coupled with the fact that Christopher Nolan is bringing his usual all-star cast and his brother Jonathan Nolan into screenwriting duties on a sci-fi epic, yeah, I'm sold. I mean, on paper, this sounded very interesting. It sounded like something he hadn't necessarily done before. Not that Christopher Nolan has steered away from sci-fi up to this point, because obviously Inception was sci-fi, but we've never really seen him go into space. And I think a lot of people can agree that when it's done well, the concept of space travel can actually be a very fascinating movie, even without a bunch of Star Wars-esque space battles. I mean, when Gene Roddenberry in the original Star Trek, when he called space the final frontier, he was very right on that point, because space is just so vast and unexplored that yeah, us being as curious as we are, we would naturally wonder, what is out there? Where could this line of thought eventually take us? I mean, in thousands of years, will we have colonized other planets? Blah blah blah. I mean, all these questions are things that are ripe for exploring in filmmaking. I mean, when you look at something like Star Trek or Mass Effect or Star Wars, I mean, it's other planets are already colonized. Except Interstellar, the premise is it takes place in a much closer future to our own. A bunch of astronauts discover this wormhole, and it could potentially open up all sorts of possibilities in terms of light speed travel. Because wormholes, as far as we know, deposit what they suck in someplace else. I hope I'm not fudging on any details, but that's the basic premise. I mean, McConaughey, Anne Hathaway, and a team of astronauts basically make the decision to venture through this wormhole in order to save the planet, because the planet is, as far as they revealed, the planet is in sort of a stagnant resource state. I mean, it's not really prospering like it used to. So looking for new prospering opportunities in space, actually makes for a very interesting, or actually makes for a very intriguing premise about the transitional period, um, from where we are now to where we apparently end up in something like Star Trek. And obviously, this premise has been brought up before. For instance, Mass Effect briefly said at the beginning, on Mars we discovered the mass relay and it boosted our technology forward um, so many years. Blah blah blah. But I don't really think this particular premise, this particular story of just discovering this method of travel and this aspect of space. I don't really think it's been explored in much detail on film before. It's already a pretty original premise, and that coupled with the fact that Christopher Nolan, according to the interview on the panel, he is influenced by a bunch of sci-fi movies that he watched growing up, like for instance, Star Wars, Blade Runner. Sorry, I can't talk. The closest example that he could come up with as a comparison was 2001: A Space Odyssey. So if you're comparing your movie to Kubrick, then you really must have something special up your sleeve. So yeah, I'm excited. I mean, it's got a great cast. It's got an interesting premise. And the trailer itself really pulled at your heartstrings as to what exactly these astronauts would be leaving behind. Specifically, what McConaughey's character would be leaving behind, because he has children. He has two little girls, or one little girl. I forget which one. But the point is, he has family on Earth. He has actually something to lose by going on this voyage. So. And Anne Hathaway said, "Can't you just tell them that you're going to save the world?" So, what I think would be really interesting as a point of discussion in the movie would be if they actually brought up McConaughey's responsibility to his kids and kind of weighed that in with his responsibility to humanity. And they kind of touch on that in the trailer with him saying, I'm doing this not only for them but for all of humanity. So I think it would really be interesting to explore his motivation as to whether it's more for his kids, whether it's for humanity, whether he should even be responsible for humanity, whether this is really a selfish decision. Is he really doing this for the good of humanity? Blah blah blah. So yeah, I think this has all the makings of a potentially intriguing movie. And like I said, with the reteaming of Christopher Nolan with his brother Jonathan. In screenwriting duties, and again returning to the director's chair, which he has not occupied in 2 years. I actually think Interstellar is going to be a very, very fascinating movie. I think the comparisons to Gravity will be inevitable, given the subject material and how it's being marketed as a more authentic sci-fi movie. However, I don't know if they're going to do a more stylized version of people in space, or if they're going to go for a more realistic route like Gravity. And if they do go for a more realistic route, how are they going to differentiate traveling through a wormhole versus drifting in Earth's atmosphere? So yeah, Interstellar. Ever since it was announced, I've been intrigued by the premise. I've been intrigued by the fact that Christopher Nolan is doing a sci-fi movie. And yeah, my hopes are still high. I mean, if the panel and the trailer have done anything, they've gotten me even more hyped by actually giving us a clearer picture of what to look for. So yeah, Interstellar, please be good.